What's up? Welcome to the Comeback Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Blake, and I'm here with my coach, my mentor, my friend, Michael Bann. Been a coach in the industry 20 plus years, something like that.
Something like that. What am I, 30? I'm almost 40.
Yeah.
About that. Yeah. Fuck, I'm old.
So lots of knowledge, lots of like books, reading, research, studying. I think you were an adjunct professor too in
No, I taught cadaver anatomy and physiology cadaver labs
Okay.
at Arizona State, but I was not a professor.
That's still a pretty cool title though.
I mean, I got to play with a lot of dead bodies. That also sounds kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I taught a bunch of young kids anatomy and basic anatomy and physiology, and the basics of like immunology. Like this is what an eosinophil is. This is what a basophil is. Blah 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 blah. Stuff like that. Like I think really the hardest part for that was teaching the actual, like, I guess the word is like rogue straight up memorization of like bones, muscles, tendons. Like that's what I did, is I taught them how to do that with cadaver labs. That's mainly what I did when I was working at ASU, and it's just to pay the bills.
Yeah, that's wild. Actually, I've never asked you that in depth. The only thing I ever think of with cadavers is, so we had our first kid, and we had a dog for a year, and he still was not very well trained. So I was like, we got to get the dog well trained. We're about to bring a kid home. So the lady who trained our dog was a cadaver dog trainer, and she said, as long as you give us the placenta, I'll train your dog for free. So we did a trade out where we gave our first placenta to this lady because she trained cadavers for dogs with placentas. That's how they actually train dogs to go find bodies. Weirdly enough. So I got a free month of dog training, and all we had to give was something we already had, which I don't know. It's weird, but we're on a weird topic. Let's get after it.
No, that's I never even thought about that. Like, how did they train a rescue dog to locate bodies? That makes sense, and they need something like that. I mean, the only cool story I really have, I have two cool stories from teaching. One, when I would teach the muscle anatomy, I would teach the gracilis, it's the muscle on the inner thigh, and I would always stand up and I would say, well, when somebody rubs your inner thigh, you say gracias. They would always remember gracilis from that. And then also when I would teach the functional anatomy of the core,
That's awesome.
gracias. And I would say it just like that.
Yeah.
I would be super creepy, and no one ever got it wrong. But then also when I would teach the functional anatomy of the core, I would talk about the rectus abdominis. Yes, it's a trunk flexor, but it also is an anti-trunk extender, because you get this flexion moment versus flexion movement. So it kind of prevents this while also providing this movement. So in one of the exams that I wrote up, I asked, what is the functional use of the rectus abdominis? This one kid, he clearly did not study. He was bombing this test, but in the answer for this one, he wrote, to get them ladies. And I was like, you're going to get points for this, dude. Like, you get points for this, but you still get 20% on this exam. I'll never forget. He wrote DEMLADEEZ. And I was like, oh, dude. Good luck in life, buddy. He's probably some wealthy tech entrepreneur now, the kind of guy that sucked at school, but excelled in building something outside of school. So it was hilarious, man. But those are the only two cool stories I have from teaching.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about something you and I talked about off air a little bit that I think we're both passionate about. And the more we talked about it, the more we thought this is a good podcast topic. So what we're going to jump in today is the rage of longevity in the fitness industry. And I want you to just open, and I'm going to feed you here. What is longevity? What do you see in the fitness industry from influencers, from what we're being kind of marketed to, from programs and designs and all that stuff? And then how should we even think about longevity?
I just thought of a perfect tweet for that. I'm going to put that up later. Longevity is a coward's approach to fitness. Straight up,
wow.
Nobody, who gives a flying, can I use the F word?
try to refrain, please.
Okay, who gives a flying fudge about your bone density, right? Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Yes, like, yes, if you fall and you break your hip, help, I'm falling and I can't get up. You got to press a little button on your necklace. Paramedics get there, they Sparta kick your door open, and then they're like, oh my God, grandma fell down. Let's get him to the hospital. And then you're dead a year later. Sure, whatever. But come on, man. Like my dad smoked 42 years. He drank. He lived an amazing life. He married one woman. He met her at 19, proposed on the second date, got married 6 weeks later. He spent 54 years traveling the world with my mom. He raised two sons. You know, one son is incredible. Me, the other son, I don't know if I'm incredible yet, but my brother's an amazing man. He's married for over 20 years. He's got 5 kids. You know, my dad did an amazing job living life. He never went to the gym. So when we want to talk about longevity, freak man, sorry,
All good.
I get really heated about this, but you can go take your statins and go take your blood pressure medicine and live, right? Like you don't have to go to the gym to live a long life. Like you just don't. So this idea of like, well, I'm training for longevity, it's like, nah, you're a coward. You're afraid to die. You're one of those people that wants to live through your fitness versus, or live for your fitness versus live through your fitness. And I'm sure I'll catch a lot of flack from people, but longevity and also vitality was kind of this um, like catchphrase that was created by these narcissistic fitness gurus who were like, well, this is how you train for vitality. It's like, bro, you take growth hormone and you convince people to give you extremely high amount of dollars for your bullcrap antics, and you just basically run around shirtless and you take growth hormone and you take anti-aging peptides and you go supra physiologic with your testosterone dose, and then you're telling everybody how to train to be vital. Like, get out of here, man. You make so much money from just being a narcissistic influencer that you don't have to wake up at 5 in the morning and take care of 3 kids like Sally Sue stay at home mom does, or you know how the divorced dad of 2 that has to pay 50% of his salary in alimony or whatever. You don't live that life. Like, get out of here with your bullcrap antics of like, this is vitality. No. And then on top of that, I mean, if you want to like live long and prosper, like that's cool. But I think, you know, people at the end of the day, they want to be jacked. They want to be strong. They want to have energy, and they want to be able to bang their significant other until they're like 75. Like, let's be real, dude. Like, I talked to my mom about this, and it's weird to talk about sex lives and stuff, but I think it's a human thing. My mom told me that they had a sex life up until about 3 months before he died. Because about 3 months before he died, it was like, okay, you know, his energy is low. He's got cancer. He's done, right? And he
Mm.
slept in until 10 sometimes or whatever. But they had a sex life all the way into their 70s. And if I could say like one thing about like, well, how would I want to train? It's like, yeah, I'd like to be able to have sex until I'm like 75, 80, 90. Like I want to have sex until the day I die. If you're going to talk longevity, that's it. But let's not talk about like functional life stuff because adrenaline is powerful. Like
Mm.
your wife, you know, my girlfriend, whatever, if there's a fire in the house, adrenaline is powerful. She's dragging me out by my wrist, by my hair. She's going to grab my foot and just rip me out of the building. Your wife's going to do the same. We see incredible things done under adrenaline. So this whole idea of like I'm training for life, it's like shut up, you're not. Like you can't. You're ridiculous. Like train to be strong, train to be jacked, but let's not fool. Let's not try to fool anyone. Like we're training because we want to look badass. We want to look like what superheroes look like in the movies, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this whole idea of like, oh, I'm training for longevity, it's like, shut up. Like, do some bicep curls and go for a hike. If you really want to train for longevity, get out of the gym. Like, you don't actually train for longevity. And you don't even know what longevity is. And it would really suck for you to get into a car accident tomorrow and never have experienced some cool ass shit in life. Yes, strong people are harder to kill and honestly more useful in general. And that's a Mark Ripito quote. But, you know, I think the idea of just longevity is a coward's approach to fitness. It's just like, well, I don't want to die. I'm afraid to die. So I'm just going to try and prevent my death. It's like, shut up. Everyone's going to die. Like, learn to live life.
So Well said. Lots of great points there. What would you say, like, everyone's got to kind of come to their own conclusions on like what a greater life looks like for them, and how they want to use that their body for that. But why would you argue that someone should be thinking more about getting strong in the gym versus trying to whatever longevity looks like in the gym? Like, and then also approach that with like mobility, because mobility is another big one that like I feel like falls into the longevity vitality crew of you got to be mobile in all these ways. Like, what do you say to that? What have you seen over the last 20 years, and like what kind of still stands true that you've kind of been seeing consistency on that?
I mean, well, let's ask that question. Like, mobility for what? Like,
Hmm.
do you need to be able to do stupid FRC style movements to like live a wonderful life? No. My mom, she does CrossFit. She does the CrossFit Open every year. She doesn't do anything FRC related. But you know what? She can pick up her grandkids. She can pick up the 40-pound bag of salt for the water softener because we have the hardest water in the world out here. We have we got we got water that's harder than an 80-year-old on Viagra, man. It's terrible. You can't take me anywhere, dude. I'm a walking billboard of inappropriateness. But she's functional, right? Like she doesn't need to do FRC mobility. I gotta be a supple leopard and spend 37 minutes doing lacrosse balling and be hyper nuanced with my toes out versus toes forward. All that stuff is created and kind of like marketed just to sell a book or to sell a new style of a lacrosse ball or to sell a new course. It's all just gimmicks, man. If
Mm.
you want mobility, go, do some squats. Like just do some goblet squats and tell me that your hips, like if you can do a goblet squat, then you're mobile enough, right? You can hang out by a campfire. And I did that all weekend, just this last weekend. I spent the last 3 days hanging out by a campfire when there's a fire ban, and I shouldn't be doing that because it's a desert. But nevertheless, I'm a rebel. So, I stand by campfires, I hang out by campfires, I squat down, I stand up, like just live life. You don't need to do all these fancy things and just be strong. And strength is gained in the range it's trained, So if
Mm.
you think about it from like a mobility perspective, FRC is not going to give you any mobility. Like you're going to like maybe get some awareness of your mobility, but if you just do some goblet squats or some front squats or some back squats, you're going to be fine. And if you just learn to do some basic movements, you don't need to do that much specialized mobility training. You can just do progressive overload. Like if you struggle, like my mom did, do some box squats to a 30-inch box, then drop it to 24, then drop it to 20, then drop it to a med ball. Guess what? You're goblet squatting 53-pound kettlebells to a 20-pound med ball. I think you can get up and off the toilet pretty easily. I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Mm.
Just look at people that we train, like I used to train a lot of people with cerebral palsy. People walk in, they don't even walk into the gym. They limp into the gym with cerebral palsy with a walker, right? They can't work out and they have all this pain in their legs and they're not very independent in that sense. And you put them through some workouts and a year later, one of the guys I worked with years and years and years ago, he was able to do some back squats with 135 pounds. Is that going to win any records? No. But he was back squatting 135 pounds to a medicine ball. His knees were caving in. He failed every movement screen out there. Like every single movement screen, whether it's like OPEX's move or if it's FMS or if it's whatever movement screen that's out there, Mike Boyle's version, OPEX ripped off the FMS, so it's all the same shit. At the end of the day, he failed all of them. What am I supposed to do? Just sit here and say, hey man, we need to do a ton of FRC and we got to do a bunch of PNF stretching and blah, blah, blah. No. Put a dumbbell in your hands, squat down, build up. Eventually you get to a back squat and you can do 135 pounds. He didn't need a walker anymore, but he failed every movement screen. What am I supposed? And he never got hurt, never got injured, even though he's supposed to, because these movement screens talk about how like, hey, injuries and blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
I think people just overcomplicate it, and there's way too much marketing out there for this longevity bullcrap.
Would you say, I mean, it sounds like this, and I've had the privilege of getting to like be mentored and listen to you for the last 2.5 years. So I remember when I first heard you say, some of these things that you just said, it was like, it kind of like, irked me a little bit. And I probably feel some of our listeners be like, what is he talking about? Like training just into range of motion. That's the only way. What would you say then? Because their next question, I'm assuming, would be like, well, what do you do if you're in pain? Why, like, that's why I do mobility, is to make sure I stay out of pain and injury prevention and all this stuff. Like, what do you say to the person who's like in pain? Why do you think they're in pain now? Is it a mobility issue, a strength issue, or is it like something else? And then how would you then address like injury? Um,
Yeah. Pain's a complex one, man. One, whenever I think of people that are in pain, you never want to invalidate their experience,
mhm.
right? Like, is it possible that they're in pain but there's no damage? Of course. Hurt doesn't always equal harm. That's a Greg Lehman thing. I've heard Greg Lehman say that, I don't know, a couple 100,000 times, right? Like the guy, you want to understand pain and you want to reconcile pain with biomechanics. I think his course is Reconcile Pain Science with Biomechanics. Greg Lehman, no one better at it than him when it comes to that. Like that guy goes toe to toe with like neurophysiologists like Lorimer Moseley and all those guys. Greg's stuff is fantastic. And if you really want to understand pain, go dig into Greg Lehman's courses. I think his last name is Lehman, but he's brilliant, right? Read books like Why Things Hurt. Watch the TED Talk, Why Things Hurt. Read books like Pain Supercharged, or any of these, like The Sensitive Nervous System by David Butler. Read these books and understand that pain is an experience. It's not just a mechanical thing. And that's why we have this thing called the biopsychosocial model of pain. So, from a social aspect, I worked with a Brazilian about 7 years ago, and in their culture, they had many ways to express love and to express affection, not as many ways to express pain. And so we would do deadlifts. And just like anyone else that does a heavy deadlift, your back gets a little tight sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. That's like saying, hey, I did some curls and my arms feel a little tight today. Well, in his mind, he didn't understand that that was kind of a normal thing after some heavy deads. So in his mind, his brain could only understand this must be damaged. I must be injured right now because I'm sore. So we have to understand that people's pain doesn't always mean that they have something physically or mechanically wrong. Do I want to rule out discogenic stuff? Absolutely. I want to rule out those red flags. I want to send someone like, hey, like this might be an actual like disc issue. My mother had that a couple of years ago. It was like, yeah, that actually could be a disc based on all of your symptoms. Let's get an MRI. Turned out it was a disc. But a lot of the times these experiences people have, there might be a biomechanical trigger. It's like they picked up a toaster and they moved it on the counter, and then they're like, oh, that was it. And it's like, what's a 3-pound thing, and that threw the back out. But a lot of the times pain, it's not just biomechanical. And we see this with CrossFit. We see people that do get injured, or what I like to say hurt, because they're not injured, but they end up with some form of a pain experience. And sometimes it's neurodynamic. I look at a lot of neurodynamics with folks and I'm like, man, yeah, like if you just do some McKenzie press ups and you do some supine and or slump sciatic nerve glide type stuff or slides, you can either tension or you can slide it. All of a sudden, significant improvements within a couple of weeks.
Mm.
So when people, are saying they have pain, the first thing I want to do is I actually want to ask them like, hey, what is your experience you're having? Like, talk to me about that. Like, what's going on? I want to understand what triggered it, but I also want to understand, has it ever happened in the past? What was it like for you then? But more importantly, not just like the experience of the pain, like, oh, my back is tight, whatever. I want to understand what is preventing you from doing, because that makes pain worse, man. Like, my back hurt. Oh man, I was jacked up in January for an entire month. I was the dummy basically because my coach wants to get one of our white belts his blue belt. So I was the guy that my coach demonstrated on, and then the white belt had to practice all the moves on me, and we happened to be going over something that just really smashes down on the spine. So all of January, my back was just wrecked. but it didn't really get in the way of me experiencing any fun. Like I could still go to the range. I could still shoot my pistols. I can shoot my rifle. I could run and I can gun. I still did jujitsu. I still could bench press and do all the cool stuff. But I mean, waking up, I was really stiff and stuff hurt. But if that pain would have gotten in the way of the things I love, oh man, like it probably would have been a million times worse. So I want to understand, like, hey, this pain you experience, is it getting in the way of you living the life that you want to live terms? I'm willing to bet that's going to be worse pain than just like, yeah, I wake up and it's a little tight, but I'll get over it. So I want to understand people's experience. And then I want to figure out like, okay, well, let's consider Hebb's law, which is the law of a neurological law or concept. It's like circuits that fire together, wire together, but circuits that fire apart to part. So let's say you have knee pain when you squat. It's like, okay, well, can you leg press? Yeah, when I leg press, my knees don't hurt. It's cool. Let's leg press. We'll be strong there. I've used this on you in the past. And it's like 6 weeks later, we come back. Hey, man, try some squats. Yeah, dude, my knees feel great. Did I really change your knee joint? No. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes your brain just associates a movement with some form of noxious stimuli. And it's like, give it 6 weeks and continue to train, but just in a slightly different way, and we feel better. And I think that's something that I do a lot with people, is because they think that because they have pain that there's damage and they have to avoid stuff. And quite often that's the opposite. I think.
So I'm going to cut you off for a second, because you said a ton there is really good. And our question really was like, is pain always musculature, or is it a mobility issue? And you said you went over a couple things. You went over, it can be a disc issue. So it could be like structural. It could be a nerve issue. And it could be just like psychologically association in a sense, or it might be a better way to say that. But those are the things I'm hearing. Does that sound right?
Yeah, for sure. It could also be inflammatory. The amount of times I've seen people that have joint pain and then we just clean up their gut health, and 4 weeks later they're like, I can't believe I don't have arthritis anymore. I've done that, I don't know, maybe 100,000 times in my career.
Yeah, you did it last week with me. I literally hit you up and was like, dude, I couldn't sleep all last night. My back was hurting. You're like, what was your diet? I'm like, well, I did go to like a church party. I had a little bit of pizza and ice cream sandwich. You're like, bro, stop eating like an idiot. And like the next day, my back already felt better.
I didn't say stop eating like an idiot. You inferred I am eating like an idiot. But realistically, right? Like, we know that itis is inflammation, right? And we know that gut health plays a huge part with that. But so does sleep, so does happiness, so does fulfillment, so does inspiration. So many things play into pain. And that's why we call it the biopsychosocial. Because if you can't, like, let's say, actually, perfect example, I had a Catholic client. She was 80 years old. She couldn't, and I believe the term for Catholics is genuflex. It's when they get down on like their knees and they cross themselves.
Mm-hmm.
She would go to mass and she couldn't genuflex. And that really upset her because it got in the way of her spirituality. Her knee pain was terrible. All she said was, I just want to be able to go to mass and get on my knees and pray. And I'm like, heck yeah, girl, let's do this. And that's all we did. We just focused on finding ways to make her be able to do that again. And that, that was what was important to her. So her social life was impacted. Her social world was impacted because of her pain. But then we also have a psychological component to pain, right? So it's not always just biomechanical. And I think we get so caught up in this like biopsychosocial that we get too caught up in the biomechanical. But also, we can talk about like biochemical, biophysiological, inflammation, gut health, blah, blah, blah. But I think we need to really just, whenever we have this chronic pain thing, just ask ourselves, like, am I really happy in life? Am I really inspired? And happiness is fleeting, so we shouldn't be chasing happiness, but perhaps chasing joy is a better way to word it. The Book of Joy is a great book on this. The Dalai Lama and the Archbishop. Oh man, I can't remember his name now. But they had like a multi-day meeting and they just had a great conversation about joy and emotions and blah, blah, blah. I think most people, like if you look at the guy that is in the best mood of his life, his back probably won't hurt as much. And then, you're in a terrible mood, work sucks, blah, blah, blah. You probably have more pain. You stub your toe, right? You win the lottery, you win $1 billion, and you're walking up to collect that 6 foot wide check and you stub your toe and you break it. You're like, ow. whatever. I'm buying a new toe. I'll buy a whole new leg, whatever. It doesn't matter. Stub your toe right after your house is foreclosed on as you're walking out the doors, same broken toe. I bet that hurts way more.
Mm.
So we have to understand that pain is a human experience. We also have to encourage people and invite people into understanding that everyone will have pain. You will not live life without pain. Everyone will have back pain at some point in their life. Like you're gonna have it. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're damaged. This doesn't even mean there's necessarily anything wrong with you.
Yeah.
We know that everybody is going to experience pain. Everyone's going to struggle at some point. So when we can remind people of previous experiences with pain and be like, hey, remember that one time, 3 years ago, this happened. Look how awesome you got out of that. Like, look how much more fit or whatever you built out of that. You're resilient. We need to remind people that we're freaking cavemen at the end of the day. My ancestors killed woolly mammoths with sticks and they won. Like, we're not exactly the top of the food chain if it's me versus a bear, right? Like I'm probably going to lose that fist fight, but somehow we still manage to become this proliferative species on this planet. And so we're resilient creatures. I try to invite people to remember that we're tough, we're resilient. It's just because you're experiencing pain doesn't mean there's anything necessarily wrong with you. We just need to work through it. And I always try to invite my clients to understand that. And that's something that, I know I can be a very facetious person, but when it comes to pain, that's tough because all these gurus out there have talked about how like, this FMS, this movement screen, whatever is going to help prevent pain. You can't prevent injury or pain. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible.
That's part of the longevity fallacy that you were kind of hitting at earlier, is that there's kind of marketed this place of oasis that if you were mobile enough, strong enough, and you pass everything on these tests, you'll be pain free and live a great life. And that's just not reality.
I mean, I've worked with so many people that are a absolute hypermobile freak, like contortionist, right? They do the Baton hypermobility test and they're like, elbow extends all the way out, elbow extends all the way out. Their thumb touches their elbow, not just their wrist, right? Like, I can't do that. Their pinky bends all the way back. I know one woman, I can take my hand and do this, and I can literally bend her fingers back to her wrist, right? Like hypermobility. So they can pass every single movement screen easily. Yeah, they have pain. So when we talk about these movement screens, do I think it's important to look at movement? Of course. It's kind of like, maybe I don't throw 200 kilos on your spine today because that's how you squat. Maybe I need to work around this a little bit. So I'm not saying we don't do movement screens by any means, but we need to understand that pain is not just movement. It can't be. It's not just mobility. Maybe it can be, but honestly, pain is so much more complex. And the more and more I investigate it with my clients and just people all over the world, the more I realize that people just need to work harder and they need to realize that they're robust and they're resilient. And I really think that's what the best physical therapists do. Like my good friend, Dr. Jeff Barron, and Frank Tardy as well. They're both doctors of physical therapy and they're brilliant. And they're here in Scottsdale. They're right down the road. Their secret isn't some magical like dry needling manual therapy fix. Their secret is we make people sweat. We make people do some hard stuff. And, they also do good things like dry needling. It's one of the best ways to get some releasing of tension in the tissues. And DNS, like they do DNS. I use DNS. DNS is kind of my background when it comes to like helping people with movement for sure. I've done lots of DNS for years and years and years. I love it. I think it's by far one of the best approaches we have. But the secret is just making people work hard. If I give somebody a 7-month oblique sit and it just lights up their glutes and they're sore the next day, or even that day, they're twitching because they're so sore from that 7 months oblique sit position, that's hard work. That also tells me something. It's like, that shouldn't be that hard for you. Like bracing, like DNS, we're talking 3-month supine position bracing. If you can't brace and have a conversation, like right now, I'm maximally braced. I am 100%. Like I'm not having a hard time with my eyes. I'm not flexing my neck, right? I'm braced. Now I'm relaxed. If you can't brace like I just did, then yeah, you might have a problem down the road. I don't know when, You may never, I don't know, but it's something that I need to be aware of. So I think, that's what the best rehab experts in the world do, is they make their people work hard and build some robustness. That's really what the magic is just hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something to you that I know you're already going to have. It's going to make your brain hurt a little bit because you're so nuanced. But we've said a lot about pain, and we talked about the fallacy of just the longevity community trying to tell us that you can, if you do all these X, Y, and Z, you'll perfectly be out of pain. And there are things that can help. We're not saying they can't, but the reality is the reality is that you're going to have pain along in your training and in life, regardless. Would you say, out of the 20 years of coaching, 20 plus years of coaching, things you've seen, what would you say you see as the majority? And I know that that's a high question, but the majority of people who are in pain, would you say is caused by what?
So, one, I want to acknowledge that I have a confirmation bias, because the people that come to me aren't coming to me with orthopedic issues for surgery, right? Like, you go to an orthopedic surgeon, you're going there because you probably need like knee replacement, knee surgery, ACL, whatever. So there is a bias. There's a selective criteria for people that come to me. But the conversations I've had around the world, I used to travel and lecture internationally and nationally, and just the tens of thousands of people that I've talked to, if I could create like a catchphrase or whatever, I would say, if more people just had better sleep, maybe paid attention to their hydration a little bit more, and perhaps had some more home cooked meals, I think most people would probably not need a physical therapist or a chiropractor.
Mm,
And I say that because most people are sleep deprived, especially in America, right? Most people are sleep deprived. Most people aren't drinking water. And in America, a lot of people eat out. Even if they're going to like a healthy restaurant, they're eating out. They're not having home cooked meals. And there's a lot that goes into a home cooked meal. One, quite often it's family time. Two, really good digestion, because you're smelling your food. Look, digestion starts in the brain. It doesn't start in your gut, right? Your nervous system starts all of that. So when your, olfactory nerves are kicking in and you're smelling food and you're looking at delicious food, you're smelling, you're seeing, you're laughing with friends and family, that kicks up the rest and digest system. And I think most people are just so sympathetically overwhelmed in terms of like their autonomic nervous system is just constantly in the sympathetic state. It's no wonder we have chronic health issues and chronic pain, right? Like, and then on top of that, produce in America is so much more expensive than In-N-Out Burger. Like, for me
mm,
to go buy, I bought a bunch of dragon fruit because my girlfriend wanted some dragon fruit while we were camping. It was like $6 a fruit. We can go back to her home in Colombia and get it like at a fraction of the cost. So I think, again, if we could summarize a lot of people's pain, and I want to be very clear that pain is very nuanced. I'm not saying that it's just one thing, but if more people just prioritize their sleep, paid attention to their hydration a little bit more, and maybe had some more home cooked food. And I'm not saying go gluten free. I'm just saying cook at home. Have your gluten pasta. Have Italian food, right? Like, cook it. If you're Italian, have some pasta. I don't care if there's gluten in it or not. Like, eat at home. Spend time with your loved ones. Another one, more people just had better sex. They probably have a lot less pain.
mm.
I know that sounds crazy. I mean, when's the last time you had back pain after you had great sex?
Could you write that in my prescription for this week so I can show my wife?
Yes. I'll write that in your prescription, be like, you have to have sex. And
Yeah,
then coach said,
this is the cool down, baby, is what he said.
just
Um,
no videos for proof, please.
Nobody, yeah.
No posting of videos.
I won't do that.
But I'm
Listen,
serious, man, like,
so
it's all in the brain for the most part. That's most people. They need to just get a
yeah.
little bit less stressed, a little bit more laid.
Mm. Would you say so? We've talked about injury, like we've talked about pain. Let's move into injury a little bit as kind of like the
Yeah.
cousin to this. Would you say that there is a real, like, if we look at the functional screen on people and we see these things, like they're really likely to get injured or less likely to get injured, or is there really any good data on that? How would you say that? And like, how should we think of injury basically?
Yeah. So if we're talking absolute injury, I'm not talking like, hey, I did a CrossFit workout and now my back hurts. I'm talking like, you blew your ACL out in a soccer game or a football match, right? That's, we have movement screens, and movement screens will not predict injuries. They can't. They can't predict performance or injuries. Let's just look at the NFL Combine. If I can bench press 225 for 20 reps in a row, does that make me potentially a great football player? No, not at all. So we understand that these screens and these movement analyses and all these performance metrics, they don't predict anything, right? So the way that I would describe a movement screen, because people will hear that, well, then we just don't need a screen. They don't predict anything. It's like, well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Or throw the bathwater out with I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think of it like driving a car. I know that I cannot predict when somebody is going to run a red light. I can't predict when somebody's going to run a red light and T-bone me. I can do things to mitigate my risk. Can look left and I can look right, double check. Okay, cool. But I still can't, look left, look right, look left. Okay, I'm clear. I'm going to go. And then a 90-mile-an-hour truck flies through that I didn't see because he was going so fast. I had no idea. I can't predict that. So how do I prevent it if I can't predict it? You can't predict the future, so therefore you can't prevent it. But you can kind of use like an actuarial science approach, if you will. It's kind of like, hey, if you drive constantly 20 miles an hour over the speed limit, you don't check your mirrors before you change lanes, you don't use your signal, you run every yellow light you can, and you basically talk on the phone or text while you're driving, you're probably going to have a problem sooner than later. I don't know when, but there's probably a chance of that. So we can do things to mitigate, risk. I could drive a little bit more sanely. I could wear a seatbelt, but you can do everything right and still get killed in a car accident. And so the FMS and all these other movement screens that literally ripped off the FMS. The FMS is like the gold standard. And then everyone else is like, well, how do I recreate something like that so I can sell a product to my constituents, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think if I look at somebody and they can't stand on one leg, do the hurdle step, right? Like they can't stand on a leg and do a simple little hurdle step. Is it possible that their landing mechanics might be a little off when they jump and land on one leg? Let's say we're going to jump and try and head a soccer ball into the net, right? And I'm going to land on one leg. Is it possible that I might have a problem there? Yeah. If I look at an ACL injury, shallow knee flexion, rapid deceleration, or in other words, shallow knee flexion, eccentric control, valgus collapse of the knee, there's probably a chance that we're going to have an issue there. So we know that there's some things that can say, hey, you have a higher likelihood of this happening, but we can't say it will, because look at CrossFit. CrossFit proved all of this wrong. Before I ever even got into remote coaching, because I started remote coaching in 2014, I was doing on average 200 to 250 FMS tests or movement screens a month because I had access to that many people. And I was tracking the data, and I was doing this across a few different CrossFit gyms. People failed the FMS, absolutely obliterated it in terms of you shouldn't be doing CrossFit, but they were getting healthier and stronger and out of pain. But then I would see people like myself. I'm a great example of this. I had a 21. I had no asymmetries. I was a perfect score on the FMS. And yet I would get injured the dumbest ways. What the hell? So CrossFit kind of took this idea of this is how it is. And then CrossFit came out and was like, nope. But for years, people were kind of like, no, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. It's like, no, actually, people aren't getting hurt. They're getting better. Is their movement improving? Not really. But then also, you can cheat an FMS test. You can cheat any movement screen, right? Movement screens are just kind of litmus tests to me. So it's like blood pressure. It's kind of like, hey man, your blood pressure is 190 over 90. I can't tell you why, but we should probably have a conversation. So a movement screen, that's what it is. It's just a conversation starter. Hey, do you ever want to do a snatch? No. Well, who cares about a PVC pipe over your head to squat? Who gives a shit? Who cares about arms overhead, holding a dowel rod, holding a PVC? Who cares? Can you sit down and stand up? Yeah, cool. You can back squat, you can front squat, you can goblet squat, you can do those things. You can still squat. Maybe we just don't snatch. And even then, I've seen so many people snatch like this and hit PRs and never get hurt. And I've coached long enough now. I've worked with people for over 10 years, one on one for 10 plus years, tracking their data for 10 years. Multiple people, like hundreds. I don't see people getting hurt left and right, even though they don't necessarily do well on screens. I have seen a lot of my people that score perfect on movement screens actually have more pain and issues. So I think we use it as a means to kind of like an actuarial science, right? It's like, hey, like if you drive like this and you constantly speed and you have 37 tickets to your name, we're going to raise your insurance rates because the likelihood of you having another problem kind of high.
Yeah.
So I look at these movement screens and then I apply that to like sport, right? Like soccer, football, basketball. But again, how do I predict? Like you can have the best FMS score, you can have the best KPIs, you can have a 200 kilogram back squat. And then when a 320-pound lineman crashes into you, I don't care what your back squat is, you're dead. You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of how we look at stuff.
That was well said. I like that analogy too with the car. It's funny, you know, when I first started reaching out to you 3 years ago to kind of maybe think about working with you, I was asking you questions about my FMS actual scratch test, and I failed it, and I was scared to do to get into snatching because I had previously been told your scratch test is so bad you shouldn't snatch anymore. And so I had violated that rule going light, but I like had this itch to be like, man, I really want to try to do some heavy snatching again. And you were like, does it hurt, when you responded? And I was like, no, I'm not in any pain. You're like, then just go for it. And I remember thinking like, I've never made that simple of a connection, but I felt no pain. I could do the movement, and I have a terrible scratch test. Like it's just awful. So, and that was actually when we started talking, was just that test. And I actually wound up PR in my snatch, which was funny and pain-free. But is it the prettiest snatch? No. Is it, but does it work? Yeah. Did I have fun? Could I do it? Great. But listen, we've been talking a lot. I'm going to move us a little bit going forward about the outside the hood. Like, can you squat? Can you do these patterns? Is it musculature? All that. What would you say about longevity? We're on that topic, and like, is there any validity to living a more robust life with going under the hood? So more like our internal markers. You're known as the coach who does really good lab work. That's kind of like your niche, and gut health. Like, so what would you say are the things you see, you thought through when it comes to like wanting to live a life? We talked about like, don't think about trying to live forever, but try to live thinking about like having sex till you're 90 and enjoying your life and being strong. Where does gut health and internal markers come into that?
Yeah. Well, you can Google gut health or ChatGPT it. You can do that with gut health and then anything you want. Gut health, sex drive. You'll find a gazillion links. Gut health, skin condition. Gut health, muscle contraction. There's a gut muscle axis. There's a gut skin axis. There's a gut brain axis. There's basically a gut hormone axis, right? So I think gut health is something that a lot of people don't fully understand. One, when I say gut health, I'm not talking about necessarily dysbiosis. For sure, like I work with people that have SIBO and H. pylori and all sorts of issues. I've done more stool tests than I care to like talk about. I've even I even had one guy once. I sent him a stool test, and he sends me a picture of his poop in the toilet. And he was like, "Hey man, is this good enough?" And I was like, "Bro, stop it." I was like, "What are you doing, dude?" So like, I've done a lot of poop tests in my day, and I can tell you that like, yes, you could have dysbiosis. I accidentally drank tap water in the Middle East, and oh man, I was dying. It was not a good time, and for a period of time, I dealt with some serious arthritis. I dealt with some serious like problems that limited my fitness, and I had to clean that out. But When we talk about gut health, I always like to talk about a couple things. One, you have digestion, so the ability to break things down. Two, you also have absorption. Right? So can you absorb it? That's a big thing. And then, on a little side note to that too, you have transport. So you have to be able to transport stuff. So like transcobalamin, if you have immune system issues or whatever, and you don't have enough transcobalamin, you might have some issues with some like B vitamins or whatever. Really, gut health isn't always about just the microbiome. It's definitely a part to play, but the more and more and more I kind of investigate this with my clients and just conversations I've had with one-off consultations, because I do a lot of one-off consultations as well, the more I see it's more of a digestive problem versus pure gut health. And I think the digestive problem leads to the gut health problem. So, for example, we know people that are super stressed, right? Like, them, I know them. They work long days, they work long hours. Their mental health is abysmal. They don't set good boundaries. They have a lot of core wounds from childhood. We start talking about like attachment theory, and we start talking about, codependency and the inability to say no. And their nervous system is just so frazzled and fried that they can't even make stomach acid, right? We know that you have to be in rest and digest to kind of get enough stomach acid. So then they can't disinfect their food, right? They don't chew because they're in such a rush. They just eat their food really fast. So they don't coat their food in a saliva, which has some antimicrobial properties. And then HCl, stomach acid, also disinfects food. And so we end up with, a lot of extra bacteria in the small intestine. And so we end up with like SIBO and bloating. And then these issues cause all sorts of other problems. That I see a lot more than like parasites and whatnot. I see parasites too. I do see people that have that, and we do have to go in there and do some things. I see candida. I see fungal issues for sure. But I think really the more common one, especially in America, would be just the inability to break food down, because people are just so stressed and they're eating out. They're having Uber Eats. They're having food delivered, even though it's healthy food. They're having it delivered, and they're not taking their time to smell their food. They're not taking their time to eat. Nowhere in our evolutionary history did we have Uber Eats, right? We had to prepare our food. We had to go out and we had to get our food. We had a lot of downtime. If I was a farmer and I plowed the field, do I have to plow it the next day? No, it's done. I already planted my crop. What do? I just pray for the rain, So there's a lot more downtime and a lot more relaxation. You go to like Spain. Like my girlfriend was just in Spain and Portugal, and they have like they close everything down in the middle of the day for like a lunchtime siesta. It's like, hey, we just had lunch. We're all gonna go take a nap now for 2 hours. We'll be back in a good luck doing that in corporate America, where it's like, hey, we're going to work from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and you're going to have a work phone, and we're probably going to get a hold of you on the weekend just in case. And so just make sure you're always available. That's what's killing people's gut health. Not like the necessarily, food quality and those things, yeah, for sure. But it's not this like, oh, we're having canola oil and we have red dye number 47 or whatever it is. And, we're having all of these processed foods and it's sugar and it's aspartame and it's like you're just stressed. And that's what's killing gut health, is because we can't get into digestion. We can't even begin to break something down because we never find out a way to rest. And so the first thing people need to do to actually fix their gut health is they got to learn to say no. And that's why I get so pissed off at these influencers. I get really heated about these narcissistic fitness gurus who they get so much money from, they convince people that they know the way and that their way is the way. And so they have all this like money, and they basically live this cush life that's not stressful. It's like, and you're on anti-aging peptides, and you're on growth hormone, and you're on hormones like testosterone and blah, blah, blah. Like the Liver King, perfect example of that. Right? Like, you're not healthy because of any other reason other than the fact that you're a multi-millionaire and you take drugs. So, we want to talk about gut health. Let's talk about how to say no to things that don't really matter in life. Let's get back to living a life that's meant to meant to be fulfilling. we're not always meant to be happy. Happiness is fleeting, but even in suffering, we can find joy. And go to third world countries. I've been to a lot of third world countries, man. Places where there's like no electricity, no running water at times. It's like really, really crappy conditions, but they're happier than us.
Mm.
There's a community, there's a tribe. We don't have that. We don't have that in America at all.
Mm.
And I think that's probably the bigger killer for gut health.
Yeah.
But if we want to talk about like, stool testing, yes, you can have dysbiosis and having high eosinophils, right? Like eosinophils on a CBC with differential over 3%. We know that can reduce your cortisol for sure. We know gut health can reduce hormones. And what happens if you have high amounts of eosinophilia and your cortisol is reduced? You can't mount a fight or flight to lift heavy. So I've seen people go through my gut health protocols and within 6 to 8 weeks, all of a sudden they're hitting, 30, 40 pound PRs because we removed what dampened them. And so, yes, like dysbiosis, it absolutely plays a part with your fitness because that can dampen your sympathetic drive. So can viruses, though. We see this with viruses. We see viruses shut down cortisol production because it has to. Cortisol does have some anti-inflammatory properties. I need inflammation if I'm sick. It's a good thing, right? So if I get a virus like COVID, I saw time and time again, people took 2 to 3 months to get back to their regular strength levels. They had no symptoms of a sickness. They weren't tired. They just could not hit the numbers they had prior to COVID.
Mm.
And I remember that wrecked some people's, CrossFit Open performance. They're like, I feel fine. Why can't I just dig deep? Where's that gear at? Then, a couple months later, it finally comes back. So, viruses can cause that. Dysbiosis can cause that. Those things are very real. And if you're dealing with like an inability to lean out, even though you're in a caloric deficit, let's definitely look at that because we know that there's a gut thyroid axis. We know the gut is implicated in a lot of things, but I think it's also quite often a cop out for taking accountability for your poor behavior. And I don't mean that in a mean way, because I would never tell someone like, well, your behavior sucks, that's why you can't get results. Like that doesn't really solve anything. But too many people are living a life on someone else's terms and they don't even realize it. And I think that's more of a killer because they're just burned out. Like, why would your brain in its infinite wisdom want to bring a baby into this world and reproduce if it's constantly stressed? So if you're finding yourself constantly working and you don't have downtime, I don't care how fun it is. You can love jumping out of planes, but you need to take days off. You need to have time away from what you love. I love what I do, but I just spent the last 4 days avoiding everything I love just to spend time with my girlfriend in the woods with no cell service. I didn't have a single bar of service. I was in the woods, no electricity, just hanging out. And that brings me back to life and I can feel it. Like I woke up this morning, I could feel like everything was a little bit better for me. And you got to do that on a regular basis. It's not just like once a year, here's your 2-week vacation. So we talk about gut health. We got to also talk about the things that improve your digestion. And that one is learning to set better boundaries. Mental health is far too often overlooked when it comes to digestion. You go to a gastroenterologist because you have gut health issues. When's the last time a gastroenterologist sat for an hour and talked to you about your mental health? GI doctors aren't going to sit there for an hour to talk about your mental health. And I think, God love them. We need them. That's not their business model. And they're there to like, oh man, you got colon cancer. Like we better like save your life. So Western medicine, God love it because it really can save lives. But I think we're missing a big picture. And I think, the system is just built that way. I don't think there's getting around it. But I think if people just understood that maybe your gut health isn't really a gut health issue, maybe you just need like to chill and stop doing so much. But again, if you have high eosinophils, for sure, high monocytes, for sure, we can definitely investigate that. And I think that does play a part. Well, I know it does play a part. And ironically, those things can make your mental health worse. It's like a positive feedforward loop. How are you supposed to have great mental health and feel amazing when your testosterone is low because you have some serious gut health issues? Yeah. Then it just feeds into it. And then what are you going to do? You're going to want to go eat a salad and a steak? No. You're going to want to go have like fast food and pizza and beer, which only feeds into it more.
Mm-hmm.
And, we end up crushing our immune system. We get sick, we get a virus, and then we take antibiotics for the virus, and then it just makes things worse. So there's a wheel, in my mind. It's like this wheel, and it's doing this, and we have to put something in, bam, to make it stop, and then go the other way. Because as soon as it stops and then it spins, it goes up, right? That's kind of how I like visualize it and how I explain it to people. So sometimes, dysbiosis is a real thing, and sometimes we take care of the gut health first, and then the gut health makes the mental health better.
Mm.
Sometimes we take care of the mental health and it makes the gut health better. It's a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. There's no right way to do it. It's always going to come down to the exact person that I'm working with. It's
Mm.
N equals 1 times 10,000. It's not N equals 10,000. And I think that's where, if more people understood that, it's like I can have 10 people in front of me, all with similar like issues or complaints, and they can come from many different things. So I would, like my mentor, Dr. Tom, he would always say, there's many ways of presenting sickness, but there's only a few ways to really get sick. And I think that's where we look at like liver, gut health, nervous system,
Mm.
kidney health for sure. All those other things, they are important. But like, I think if people just took an emunctory based approach and they understood how emunctories work, I think that would help people really get their health in line. And when I take an emunctory based approach, people's fitness 100% of the time always gets better. It has
Mm.
not failed me yet. And I've done this 100,000+ times. I've written over 100,000 programs. I've worked with people for over 10 years nonstop, and I've tracked data for 10 years nonstop. Find another coach that's done that. It's very rare. And I know in my soul of souls, my heart of hearts, if you take an emunctory based approach, you will get better.
Mm.
But that means you also have to take ownership and accountability. And that's hard for some people because some people are so deeply wounded from their childhood that sometimes they just can't take accountability. And it's hard. And I empathize with them. I'm guilty of that. I mean, man, I still struggle with some things. I'm in therapy every week, every single week. I have my next therapy appointment in 3 hours. So I
Mm.
get it. I do not want to dismiss how hard some things can be, but we do need to recognize that, top down approach is just as important as that bottom up approach.
Mm-hmm. Closing. What should people really be pursuing, like health span, performance, energy, fulfillment, like on the longevity spectrum? Like we covered a lot of stuff from gut health to injury prevention to FMS, and the overarching themes have been there's good stuff in all of it, but it's not like it's usually sold to us with a lie in that it's like it's going to deliver this perfect oasis of life, right? What should people really be pursuing to live their best life?
Self awareness and self curiosity.
So,
Yeah.
mm.
Honestly, I think I was just talking to my therapist about this last week, practicing unconditional curiosity,
Mm.
right? And that doesn't mean with just others, but also with yourself. Curiosity is more or less the antithesis of judgment, right? So when somebody, again, that doesn't mean tolerance. I want to be very clear about that. Like as a coach, I'm unconditionally curious, but I'm not unconditionally tolerant. Unconditionally curious just means like I want to better understand why I do what I do. I want to dig in deep. I don't want to judge myself for it. I want to understand that I'm human and I've been traumatized. I've had some pretty tough things. I moved high schools my senior year because I was so bullied, and I went through some pretty tough times. So I have some core wounds from my childhood that directed my subconscious and my behaviors. And the more curious I got, the less shame I felt, and the more I could, dig in deeper and give myself that grace, and then really understand what really matters to me so I can live life on my terms. And also, it allows me to not necessarily judge others. It allows me just to sit there and go, huh, I can understand why you do that. I'm not okay with it in my life, but I can understand why you do it. I hope you find people to sit at your table because I don't want you to starve. I really want you to eat and not go hungry. I just don't want you to eat at my table. But I hope you can eat at your table and find your tribe. And
Mm,
that's what unconditional curiosity can do. It doesn't mean tolerance. It doesn't mean, like, uh, I'm not a deeply religious man, but like God so loved man, but he still didn't approve of their behavior and he flooded the earth.
mm,
Again, maybe I'm butchering that. You would know more than me, obviously, but like God has unconditional love for man, but he doesn't have unconditional tolerance. He does have rules. He does have things he's like, hey, maybe you don't murder people.
mm.
That's probably something you don't do. I love you and you murdered somebody. I still love you. You better repent or whatever. And again, I'm probably oversimplifying that, but I think if more people just practice more unconditional curiosity with themselves and with others, I'm willing to bet more and more people would stop being so divided. Like, just look at our political landscape. It's like, if you're not with me, you're against me. That's ridiculous. Imagine a marriage like that.
Mm,
Imagine being married to somebody that's like, if you're not with me, you're against me. That's terrible. If we just practice more curiosity, I think we'd all get a little bit healthier. And we might just stop coping with pizza and beer and sleep deprivation. And we might just all learn to like let some shit go. And that would help our gut health, our hormones, our fitness. And then you can live life on your terms because we're all going to die. And I think that's the final thing I always tell people is you have to die. Everything else in life is a choice. Nothing in life that you have to do except die. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to pay my mortgage. I could have my house foreclosed on, but I don't have to pay it.
yeah.
I don't have to do anything. I have to die. So if everything else is a choice, stay unconditionally curious. Ask yourself, like, why do I make that choice? Why do I choose to stay up until midnight? Because I'm so burned out that I don't have a moment to myself. So I only have these 2 hours from 10 p.m. to midnight to sit there and just be with my own thoughts. Oh, yeah, that makes sense as to why you're sleep deprived, man. Like, I get it because you're a single mom of three and you work two jobs and you only have 2 hours a day to yourself. I'd want to stay up late too. And I understand that.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think unconditional curiosity is what drives that empathy. Brene Brown, she says it so masterfully. When someone is vulnerable and it's met with empathy, that is the cure to dealing with shame. So as a
Mm,
coach, I'm not perfect. I'm flawed. I get overwhelmed. I get stressed, lose my cool at times. Like, I'm a human being. I'm flawed. I tell everybody that, but I really strive to meet everybody that I work with some level of empathy and curiosity and not judgment. Because when somebody is vulnerable with me, and they cry on a call or they talk to me about their problems, I want them to understand that I'm curious and I want to understand their perspective. I may never fully get it. I've never walked in their shoes, but I don't want them to feel like they're alone in that struggle. And I
mm,
think more people, more coaches practice unconditional curiosity. I think that would help a ton, to be honest with you.
for sure. Well said, man. Lots of great nuggets here. If people wanted to reach out and figure out who you are and get labs done or work with you as a coach, where can they reach you?
They can reach out to me. My email is coach@bandwagonfitness.com. So that's hopefully easy to remember. They also can just hit me up on Instagram. It's coach_Michael_Bann. Yeah, those are probably the two easiest ones. I'll be honest, I get a lot of memes that my people troll me with. So email is definitely better.
Okay. I will put this all in the podcast notes so people can reach out to you if they're curious about getting to know more of what it looks like to work with you. But Ben, I appreciate you, man. You and I have always talked about a bunch of this stuff, and it's always just so good. I had a bunch of notes over here, just re-listening to it and getting to glean and learn from you. So appreciate your time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. See ya.
See you, buddy.